Despite the disastrous failure of Operation Virtuous Mission, the Fox unit remains ahead of the Hounds, reassembling for their Hail Mary pass in Operation Snake Eater. Snake is once again entering Soviet airspace, though this time flying in a cramped D-21 drone, unable to even sit upright. Only 1 week has passed since we last saw Snake. It is now 11:30 PM, August 30th, 1964, somewhere above the Arctic Ocean. It seems Snake has fully recovered from his recent injuries, and yet it was only a few days ago that Zero had visited him in hospital.
So how does it feel to be a patient in one of the most advanced ICUs in the world?
Would you do me a favor and tell the suits about visiting hours? I'll never get better with them assaulting me day and night with their questions.
Zero informs Snake that Khrushchev called President Johnson, demanding answers about the American aircraft they detected in Soviet airspace. Johnson is steadfast in his claim that the boss's actions were not government sanctioned, and in order to prove his word as true, the two leaders form an arrangement. Khrushchev gives Johnson 1 week to capture the boss and the Davy Crockett and take out Volgin to prove America's innocence.
You expect me to believe that this was all the work of a single soldier?
I don't know what else to tell you.
The army insists that this is all a ploy on your part.
I've said it once and I'll say it again, our government had nothing to do with it.
And I would like dearly to believe you. However, I'm afraid my power over the military has weakened since the Cuban incident. I will need some kind of proof that this was not the action of the American government. You have 1 week. You must catch the boss yourselves and recover the remaining nuclear device. Then, you must find some way to prove your innocence.
Prove our innocence?
Yes, preferably something painful. Prove to me that this is not merely another one of your tricks.
The boss should be close to Colonel Volgin. How about a little co-action?
I would not expect too much if I were you. The political situation here is unstable. And Colonel Volgin is a member of the Brezhnev faction, which seeks to topple my government. 1 week. You have only 1 week, and if it is not too much to ask, do something about Volgin as well.
Snake takes this to mean that the boss must be eliminated, and he must be the one to do it, as he was her last apprentice. Unlike the Virtuous Mission, Snake will not be operating entirely alone. This will be a joint effort between East and West, and to facilitate the mission, the KGB is giving them use of their communications satellite, and put them in touch with a couple of insiders, 2 NSA codebreakers who defected to the Soviet Union in 1960, Adam and Eva. After Snake makes his landing, Zero gives him 3 objectives: rescue Sokolov, destroy the Shagohod, and eliminate the boss. The first order of business is to rendezvous with Adam at the now irradiated abandoned factory. As he makes his way there, Snake is surprised at the sight of a white Andalusian horse in the forest.
Looks like death wasn't ready for you yet.
It seems the boss has been waiting for him. She emerges from the darkness, shrouded in a black poncho. Soon she launches herself at Snake, revealing her cosmonautical white and silver sneaking suit, the first of its kind. Once again, the boss easily overpowers Snake, and this time she tells him to go home. If she sees him again, she will kill him. Snake, defeated and conflicted, must carry on back to Rasvet, wandering alone in the dark, until he suddenly finds himself engulfed in the headlights of a motorcycle. Ask the Metal Girl. You are listening to Metal Girl Solid, one woman's journey through a series she knows nothing about. I am the titular Metal Girl, Courtney Coulson, and this block begins with the best theme song of all time and ends with Snake's rendezvous with Adam. if you're playing along at home with the Shirako playthrough, that is 1 hour 13 minutes to 1 hour 43 minutes. I'm just realizing now, I don't think I've actually put it in the citations. I've never mentioned, but yes, in order to just have a nice straightforward way of tracking the plot of this game, I am looking at a playthrough on YouTube from the channel Shirako. Snake Eater. Snake Eater is the best Bond theme song to have never been in a Bond film. You know, if you ask me what my top 5 Bond themes are, I mean, you know, you've got Goldfinger, You Only Live Twice, Casino Royale's You Know My Name, Skyfall, Snake Eater, right? Right? It's got to be in there. It's this fantastic homage to the brassy big band themes like Goldfinger, which coincidentally was the Bond film of 1964. Snake Eater, the song, was written by Norihiko Hibino. Fun to say that one, isn't it? And performed by Cynthia Harrell. Here's what we know about Cynthia from her website. And I love her intro here. I'm Cynthia Harrell. I'm just a woman who's good at what she does. Singing. The kind that gives you goosebumps and the motivation to climb endless ladders. That's cute. And here's the rest. My incredible singing journey has taken my voice all over the world, where it's been featured in memorable commercials and iconic video games. I began singing commercial jingles at the tender age of 10, and from there I ventured into singing background vocals for Curtis Mayfield, alongside my mother and sisters, forming the R&B singing group Kitty and the Haywoods. In the 1990s, Konami music producer Rika Muranaka opened the door to the mesmerizing world of video games. I had the honor of lending my voice to I Am the Wind, the haunting theme from Castlevania Symphony of the Night, a game that has etched its place in gaming history since its launch in 1997. Quite remarkably, another opportunity arose for me in the realm of video game music, this time for the beloved Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater, where I have the privilege of contributing to one of the most iconic songs in video game history, Snake Eater. And she goes on about her credentials, but yeah, this woman has done a lot of stuff. And yet it was funny, when I was doing research for her, people were saying, who is she? She's this mystery. On Reddit, they were trying to do their usual Reddit sleuthing and trying to figure out, oh, here's an obituary for another Cynthia Harrell. Is this her? Did she die in 2007? But no, I mean, this woman has had this fantastic storied career, and I've actually added a few articles there for you to read. She's an interesting woman. She is clearly proud of her work in video games. She gets it. She was recently at MGS Con. Shout out to those guys. I hope I can attend a Metal Gear Solid convention one day. And she also performed Snake Eater at the NHK Hall in Tokyo. And she seems to love and appreciate her role in these video games. It's very cool. As for Norihiko Hibino, he was a composer for a number of Metal Gear games. I'm unclear how that works, because Harry Gregson Williams is credited in the opening credits there. How much is either one of them doing the music for these games? I'm not sure how that works out. Did Harry Gregson just do the theme song? Or if anyone can tell me, I have no idea. I couldn't really find any information on that specifically. Hibino lives in Shinagawa and is a professional saxophonist and started the Hibino Sound Therapy Lab, exploring the spiritual and acoustical effects of music on the human body. Whatever that means, I couldn't really figure it out, and it's all in Japanese, so... Apparently, Snake Eater was performed with a live band, and all it took was 2 takes, and they nailed it. And overall, Snake Eater, the song, it gets confusing, is an icon in gaming history. It is much beloved. It was well received by critics, although only real criticism is that verse about the tree frog. And yes, I was one of those people where the theme starts playing and I'm thinking, oh yeah, I am sold. I love this Metal Gear business. This is great. I love James Bond. And then it gets to the tree frog line and you go, Sumimasen? Sorry, excuse me? What did she just say? It does take you out of it a little bit, but I think it's this great... It so perfectly represents the strangeness of Metal Gear Solid as well, where it can be so serious and so camp at the same time, and that's why we love it. That's why we're here. So that's about as much of a backstory I could dig up on the creation of the song. There wasn't anything too complex there, but before we move on to the rest of this block, I want to go through the lyrics of Snake Eater. I'm very much a fan of lyrics. I came to poetry quite late in my life. I wasn't a big fan. I was quite literal-minded. But nowadays, I love the beauty of words, of language. And for me, what I'm most drawn to in music is the poetry, is the lyrics. So I will be speaking the lyrics because I don't want a copyright strike. I'm going to do my best Shatner talk singing. What a thrill with darkness and silence. I won't do that. I'm just kidding. What a thrill with darkness and silence for the night. I'm searching and I'll melt into you with a fear in my heart, but you're so supreme. With darkness and silence for the night. What a thrill. That's obviously referring to, sneaking. Obviously. Okay. Nothing too deep there. Right. All right. I'm searching and I'll melt into you with a fear in my heart, but you're so supreme. That's quite ambiguous. Is this from the boss's perspective? And there's been debate about this amongst fans. I even had someone suggest that it was Ocelot's perspective. You could maybe make that argument, but I think because it is a female singer, that's setting us up to think, this is the boss's song, not Snake's. But I'm searching, I'll melt into you with a fear in my heart, but you're so supreme. For me, that seems like it's more from the perspective of Snake and his regard and adoration for the boss. I give my life, not for honor, but for you. In my time, there'll be no one else. Crime is the way I fly to you. I'm still in a dream. That one, I think, is most explicitly from the boss's perspective. She's giving her life. Not for honor, but for you. Well, actually, she's giving her life for the United States. It's a matter of honor, right? She's not really doing it for Snake. So, what is the truth? Is it the song, or is it the dialogue? Crime is the way I fly to you. Obviously, defecting and nuking a research facility and all of that. Okay, pretty self-explanatory there. I'm still in a dream. Not sure about that one, although it could perhaps tie in quite nicely with my whole non-ordinary reality thesis, which I have mentioned in previous episodes, although we haven't really explored it yet. And then Snake Eater, I've discussed the significance of that name and the origins of the term. And then the next verse is the most overt and direct. Someday you go through the rain, someday you feed on a tree frog. It's ordeal, the trial to survive. For the day we see new light. And, I mean, that's basically... It's almost like a radio call. It's basically like a poetic version of a radio call between the boss and Snake. And then it repeats the chorus again, and... Well, how I interpret those lyrics is almost as a duet. It's sung by one singer, but I'm reading that more as a duet from both Snake and the boss's perspective, rather than just being the boss's perspective. And that's just my interpretation, but I don't know, that first verse seems more like Snake to me. Moving on to the aircraft in the opening of this block, the D-21 drone. The term drone has been used from the early days of aviation, some being applied to remotely flown target aircraft used for practice firing of battleships' guns, such as the 1920s Fairy Queen and the 1930s de Havilland Queen Bee. The aircraft the drone is launched from is the Lockheed YF-12 Interceptor. This was a prototype developed in 1963 but never saw production. And I admire the attention to detail in this game. They could have just used any model of jet, but they instead opted for the most cutting-edge example of its time. As for the D-21 drone, it was designed to self-destruct to prevent the Russians retro-engineering it. But that didn't work, both the Russians and the Chinese made their own copies. Once released, the D-21 would fly a pre-programmed route, utilizing an internal navigation system to the area of interest, where it would take photos. Once taken, the D-21 would fly to a designated area, eject its film canister, then self-destruct. The film canister, meanwhile, would be snatched from the sky as it parachuted down by a waiting JC-130B, or be collected by a Navy vessel. I think when Snake lands this time around, I think there is this no frills, no bullshit kind of feel about it. You know, Virtue's mission begins in this beautiful, romantic way almost, idealized, whereas Operation Snake Eater seems much more serious, and the tone is much more dour. And there's less, if we could say, luxury. Snake is stuffed into this coffin while lying inside of this drone. They say that Snake was the boss's last apprentice, so we assume the Cobras were her apprentices, which, I don't know, seems a little strange. They seem pretty close in age, and then the end is significantly older than the boss, so who actually counts as her apprentices? And we see Snake and Zero just casually smoking in a hospital, which is apparently acceptable back then. Have I mentioned that President Johnson was voiced by Richard McGonigal? He gets the intonation pretty close. McGonigal has a slightly deeper and gruffer voice, but yeah, he actually nails it. I'll insert a clip of the real President Johnson here.
Because they cut me. They're just like riding a wire fence. These are the best that I've had anywhere in the United States. But when I gain a little weight, they cut me under there. So leave me, you never do have much margin there. But see if you can't leave me about an inch from where the zipper ends, round under my, back to my bunghole. All right, then. So I can let it out there if I need to.
I've said it once, and I'll say it again, our government had nothing to do with it.
And Richard McGonigal is probably best known as Sully in the Uncharted game series, which I adore. It's one of my favorite game series of all time.
And eliminating the boss ourselves will prove America's innocence.
Now, I'm noticing how Khrushchev never once says, kill the boss. It's Snake that has jumped to that conclusion. No one has outright said that the boss must be killed. Is Adam Revolver Ocelot? Because he is Adamska. He was supposed to show up at the rendezvous, right? Why didn't he show up? We'll get into that in the next episode. But yeah, I have to wonder, what was the original plan? That is probably one of the most mysterious and ambiguous aspects of this game. Having gone through this game a number of times, yeah. Who was Adam? Was that Adamska? We'll never know. I mean, Eva is... She's always referred to as Eva. I don't think that character gets another name. And Adam is always Adam Adamska, so I don't know. And the plane in this scene is flying at 30,000 feet, which is actually quite low. On average, you will find most commercial airliners flying anywhere from about 31,000 to 42,000 feet. The jump altitude is typically between 25,000 and 28,000 feet. And we get a bit of deja vu as Snake does a less dramatic 3-point landing and Radio Zero. Major Tom realizes that Tom was not the tunnel they escaped through in the Great Escape movie. It was Harry. He does not switch to Major Harry though, but Zero. He even mentions, I ordered the film reel from the film company just to make sure I was right, okay. The paramedic is back on this mission, but if they fail, she will have a medical license revoked, so she's pretty ride or die. And I'm not sure, was Sigurd actually... He was here before, right? It feels like he's being introduced for the first time now? I don't understand. And the other thing I don't understand is the rendezvous at an abandoned factory. The same abandoned factory that was nuked last week with a nuclear weapon. It's irradiated. I mean, they actually mention it in the dialogue. The whole area has been polluted by the fallout from the nuclear blast. Okay. Snake's immune to radiation now, I guess. Honestly, I am shocked Big Boss lived to see old age. It is the most unrealistic thing in this entire game series. And he has a full head of hair? The other mystery of this game is when the boss shows up again. You know, it's only been a week, but Snake is fully healed, okay. But then the boss's hair has grown several inches, and I've discussed this with other fans, and they go, oh yeah, wow, I didn't notice. Or they'll say, oh, her hair was just held up by the bandana. No, because when Snake grabs her bandana, her hair does not change at all. It doesn't go tumbling down. It doesn't look like it's styled any particular way. It is just short hair with a bandana. And then a week later, her hair is long enough to tie into a ponytail. I don't know why that change was made. We will never know. It's a stylistic choice, I guess. Rule of cool. And the password is "Who are the Patriots?" and "Lali Lule Lo," which is a significant phrase, apparently, in the later games. But in the audio commentary, you get this insight into the code phrase or shibboleth here. So Lali Lule Lo has a place in real military history. There is Gagi Gu Gego. After the Great Kanto earthquake, this shibboleth was used to identify Koreans from Japanese due to the Korean syllable system's inability to pronounce the G sound without an audible accent. Koreans were believed to have poisoned the water supplies after the earthquake and were executed once identified. There's Babi Bu Bebo. This shibboleth was used in wartime to detect Korean spies due to the Korean syllable system's inability to pronounce the B sound without an audible accent. And then Lollapalooza. This shibboleth was used by the Americans during World War II to identify Japanese from Chinese due to the Japanese syllable system's inability to pronounce the L sound without an audible accent. Although I thought Chinese and Japanese both had trouble with the L and the R sound. And fun little aside about the boss's costume. So I am making my own version of that. I'm trying to do a PS2 graphics style. So I've actually ripped the texture of her costume from the game and printed it on fabric. And so now I'm going to create I hope, quite a unique take on her costume. And so I was working on that costume a few months back when my housemate's little second cousins was visiting. You know, they're all under about the age of 8. And they were gathered around the table while I was cutting the fabric, and they were curious about it, and so I showed them a photo of the boss, and they immediately clocked it as an astronaut suit. I love that. You know, kids, they don't have those preconceived ideas or filters, and they just go, hey, that looks like an astronaut. And I'm like, oh, yeah, you nailed it. The boss and Snake fight, and she easily tosses him to the ground, of course, and then she pulls out the Patriot for the first time. An extremely phallic gun. I don't know if that's intentional or not. She shoots the drone to draw attention. It catches on fire like these things always do in fiction. And it begins to rain again. Is the sorrow nearby?
Why'd you defect?
I didn't. I'm loyal to the end, to my purpose. What about you, Jack?
I find her wording is ambiguous. I think a lot of her dialogue is quite ambiguous, and then you'll see that in the Intel Files episode where I delve into her conversation with Snake line by line. And this is not the only instance where her message will be misinterpreted, crucially misinterpreted, by other characters and by fans. It's clear to me that this is a woman of great integrity. She is selfless, but her exact beliefs are often misinterpreted, and I think that's because this is not a woman who talks much about herself, about her philosophy, and she says as much at the end of the game. She's very clear on who she is and what she stands for, but communicating that to the rest of the world doesn't seem to come easily to her. However, it has this other effect of giving her dialogue this profound significance. It's rich with meaning and poetry. And of course, there is the nature of her work. She couldn't tell Jack everything, even if she wanted to. The boss's horse brings its hoof down on Snake's hand, and a lot of fans wonder how his hand isn't broken. And I think, the ground is soft, it's muddy. I think he could absorb the impact. It might hurt, but I don't think it would break anything. Maybe. Snake then contacts Zero immediately, and they both wonder how the boss knew where he was, and obviously later on we'll figure there is a tracking device on him. Snake continues his journey to Rasvet, and I would like there to be more opportunities for time paradoxes, and I would have loved it if there was a possibility to join the boss. In this scene, for instance, you have that choice, and even though it leads to a dead end, I don't know, I would like at least that hint. And maybe that's just coming from someone who's been playing 350 hours of Baldur's Gate, where every possibility is open to you. This is something I think about a lot with games. There's the games on rails, like Snake Eater is pretty straightforward. There's only so many choices you can make, and very few of them actually influence the plot. It's more about how you play it. But then you have games like Baldur's Gate or Detroit Become Human, which I love, by the way. I will defend that game. Where it's all predicated on your choices. There is no true version of that story except for the one you wish to tell. Whereas I think Kojima is more of a filmmaker at heart. And he has a story he wishes to tell. And he wants you to experience that in a first-hand way. But he never gives you all of that control. It's still his story, his vision. Still, I do like the time paradoxes. I do find that quite interesting. Very meta, as the kids say. And I wanted to talk about the rotating bullets of the Patriot. That's quite unusual. Quoting from the Metal Gear wiki here. This tumbling hugely reduces accuracy at any range, and all but eliminates any penetration capabilities of the bullet. But the tumbling also causes the bullets to impart unique keyhole-shaped wounds on impact. Because the bullet is tumbling, the surface area can be greater at the moment of impact, which equates to less penetration but results in more immediate delivery of kinetic energy. Put simply, the energy of the bullet is punching or ripping the flesh apart rather than cleanly piercing it. It is also worth noting that due to the much shorter barrel, the bullets would travel about 33% slower than they would from a 20-inch barrel, somewhat diminishing the lethality despite the hollow point-like effects it would gain. Yeah, I was learning all about rifling, so the inner part of the gun where the bullet goes down, there's a certain shape to it that affects the way it comes out. I don't know if they do it anymore, but you see James Bond walking along through the barrel of a gun, and it has this interesting pattern to it around the edges, and I didn't know what that was, but no, that's the rifling. Simulacra and simulation. I struggled to come up with a choice of simulation for this episode. Initially, I was going to nominate the security camera view of the conversation between Zero and Snake in the hospital. Then it revealed an amazing rabbit hole. Firstly, it's just nice visual storytelling and it reduces the demand on the animators, it's just static images. However, when I did some digging, it was nothing like the security camera footage of the time period. It was surprisingly difficult to find legitimate CCTV footage from the early days of this technology. And there's a reason for that. The earliest surveillance system was, unsurprisingly, devised by Nazis, but they weren't able to record the footage. Instead, it was simply a remote observation. It was a live feed, which was initially to observe the launch of the V-2 rockets. Quoting Deep Sentinel here, the earliest CCTV cameras available to the public appeared in 1949. Produced by American company Vericon, they still couldn't record and required constant monitoring. But just 2 short years later, in 1951, the videotape recorder, VTR, was invented. Early versions were open reel devices that allowed a live image to be recorded reel-to-reel on magnetic tape. The first commercially available model was the VR 1000. The recorder debuted in 1956 at a cost of $50,000. It was the size of a desk. Initially developed for television, the technology quickly jumped to the security industry as well. However, it wasn't practical for private home use just yet. Only large corporations and government buildings could afford such equipment. Security details extensively used CCTV security cameras during Queen Elizabeth II's coronation in 1953. In 1960, during a visit by the Thai royal family, CCTV again. London Transport installed a few CCTV cameras in the train station in 1961. New York had a few covering Times Square in the mid-1960s. And the oldest footage I found was from 1968, which will be in the citations. It's incredible how clear it is. I questioned if it was even real at first. This is because they were using VTR, videotape recorders, rather than the video cassette recorders which would come later. So on the one hand, it's very clear and high quality footage, but on the other hand, it needed constant monitoring and operation to change the reels as needed. Yet another niche job created and destroyed by technology. It's actually more recent CCTV that would greatly reduce the frame rate to save on storage, but that's more of a digital thing. Though the cathode ray strobing is accurate either way for this sequence in Snake Eater. So this simulacrum had me fooled. I was seeing what I expected to see and not what I would realistically have seen. Alright, so the simulation for the episode became the simulacrum. We got a simulacrum, so what's the simulation for this episode? Well, it took me a while to realize it, but we have 2 NSA code breakers who have defected to the Soviet Union in this game, and also in real life. It's undeniable that Adam and Eva are based on Martin and Mitchell, 2 real-life NSA codebreakers who defected to the Soviet Union. And I will quote from the Joiner library here. It's a story filled with uncanny parallels that could be plucked directly from today's headlines. Young men working with the National Security Agency, NSA, who grow disillusioned by what they find, abscond with classified information, and end up seeking asylum in Moscow, or Moskva, depending on where you're from. 53 years before Edward Snowden left his job as a consultant with the NSA and ultimately pursued refuge in Moskva. A pair of disillusioned NSA employees, William H. Martin and Vernon F. Mitchell, defected to the Soviet Union. This is what they had to say about the defection in a Russian press conference. We were employees of the highly secret National Security Agency, which gathers communications intelligence from almost all nations of the world for use by the US government. However, the simple act that the US government is engaged in delving into the secrets of other nations had little to do with our decisions to defect. Our main dissatisfaction concerns some of the practices the United States uses in gathering intelligence information. We were worried about the US policy of deliberately violating the airspace of other nations, and the US government's practice of lying about such violations in a manner intended to mislead public opinion. Furthermore, we were disenchanted by the US government's practice of intercepting and deciphering the secret communications of its own allies. Finally, we objected to the fact that the US government was willing to go as far as to recruit agents from among the personnel of its allies. And that is basically the plot of Snake Eater, isn't it? It is so close to reality. And yet, it goes into these fantasy realms as well. Isn't Metal Gear so good, guys? It's so great. It's edutainment. The Piggyback Game Guide. In this part of the guide, we have just some character bios, nothing too surprising here. Nice to see the Shinkawa artwork, of course. This is a beautiful book. I'm glad to have this in my collection. Although, it states that Snake and the boss's date of birth and birthplace and all of that are unknown. And yet the wiki gives us that information. So where does it come from? Eva's bio is the only one worth mentioning so far. Snake was due to meet an agent known as Adam, but instead meets Eva, a highly direct individual with a keen aim and a penchant for exhibitionism. The page on Dremuchi South, where you begin the game, lists all the possible animals to be found there. According to this, there is no Markhor there. But that was the first animal I encountered in this game and killed. So, when you land, the very beginning of the game, and you turn around, or at least when I turned around, right behind me was a Markhor. And it's not listed here. I don't know, was that just a weird glitch for me? I'm curious to know. If I were a game designer, I think I would like to put something scary behind the player. You know, if it's laid out like this where you're very much inclined to move forward and not just look around and go in whatever direction you want. So the few players who actually think to turn around, they turn around and then, oh Jesus, they see a jump scare and then it disappears. So they think they hallucinated the whole thing. The game guide claims that Markhor means snake eater, which I scoffed at, of course. But no, get a load of what Wikipedia says. The Markhor is the national animal of Pakistan, where it is also known in English as the screwhorn or screwhorn goat. But the word Markhor means snake eater, coming from both Pashto and classical Persian languages, referencing the ancient belief that the Markhor would actively kill and consume snakes. This regional myth is believed to stem from the snake-like form of the male Markhor's horns, twisting and curling like a snake, possibly leading ancient peoples to associate them with snakes. And I'm reading a book called Golden Bough right now. Light reading, it's like a 40-hour audiobook, but it's a 19th century book about all ancient practices. And there is this element of magic, which is like creates like. So if a goat has horns that look like a snake, it obviously has some sort of snake powers or has some power over snakes, or they have that real associative way of thinking about the world. And this, all traditional cultures have this. I mean, modern people do too. It's a very human thing. You see, well, this looks like a snake, therefore it must be related to snakes. End of story. The guide mentions bug juice, and I never used it. Apparently it's effective against the pain. I'd love to know. I mean, I'm going to be playing Delta, so I guess that's my chance to try it again. I am shocked you can find the SVD sniper rifle hiding in Dramuchi North. That's really early in the game. However, you can lose it after meeting Sokolov. I'm assuming they're hinting at the failure of Operation Virtuous Mission. Here's a quote about Sigint. Sigint, in signature MGS style, introduces himself and digresses wildly in the direction of topics such as the Cobras and Davy Crockett. And I love that about Metal Gear, is every character is a bit of an otaku. I think that's one of the most endearing aspects of it, and what draws people to these games is that these characters are so human. They have their eccentricities, they're human beings, they're not these gruff, soulless machine soldiers that have no emotions and no... I'm wondering if Solid Snake is going to be like that. Is that why this game is the way it is? I don't know. I'm just wondering. You know, Solid Snake going to be like this really serious soldier man who has no feelings whatsoever. He's just like real cold and, sorry babe, no time for love. I'm Solid Snake, I gotta save the world. But I'm no hero. I don't know. Is that what it is? I don't know. I question why they've called it a crocodile cap. Why isn't it a gavial cap? Gavial hat? It's gavials in this game, right? I like the attention to detail that you require more stamina in the rain. And also, the sound of your stomach rumbling can alert guards. And the clap of your ass cheeks. I've heard that meme, I know that one. There's nothing interesting in the Ocelot bio, but did you know that the Spetsnaz GRU logo is basically the Batman symbol? I don't know if the Batman logo is actually based on the GRU logo or vice versa, but there is this little bit of trivia here. If you shoot Ocelot's cap off his head, he'll run to retrieve it before resuming his assault. Gotta look good at all times, of course. The Japanese novelization. Page 63 states Snake is wielding an AK-47. AK refers to the family of assault rifles made by or derived from the weapons designed by Mikhail Kalashnikov, so in short, a Soviet weapon. And here I'll read perhaps my favorite passage from the entire book. A figure was approaching from the other side of the bridge. Snake momentarily forgot to fire his gun because the figure was taking such long strides but didn't shake the bridge at all. It was as if she was weightless. It was the boss, who was supposed to be in the Arctic Ocean. She stood there with her blonde hair tied back, a stern expression on her face. Her blue-grey eyes were sharp and unwavering, reflecting her overbearing will. She was tall and covered in a US Army field uniform, and her well-trained body was one that could hold its own against male soldiers in combat. Her human beauty, rather than her feminine beauty, was there, exuding a presence that overwhelmed those around her. And I love that, her human beauty, rather than her feminine beauty. I think that so beautifully encapsulates the power and appeal of this woman. She is beautiful, but not in a way that is deliberate and self-conscious and trying to appeal to the opposite sex. She is just so powerful and magnetic. She is like an apex predator, you know, a tiger, a wolf. You just admire the beauty and the strength and the intellect and the cunning. Can you tell I'm a bit gay for the boss? Yeah. Page 66. Can't decide if the pain has bees or hornets. It's bees, Snake warned the scientist and threw away his automatic rifle for fear of an accidental discharge. He changed his weapon to a pistol and took the CQC stance he had created with the boss in front of him. A swarm of small insects was already in his sights. Page 67, the Cobra unit are described as strange creatures, but we are given nothing more detail than that. Page 68, and this is an interesting one. It seemed like the Fox unit was made as a decoy for the soldiers on the helicopter. It never expands on that, but, well, given all the conspiracies and depths we have already extracted from this game, I mean, was everything staged? Was it all staged? It's all staged all the way down. Page 68. This is another one I quite like. Raining blood. Is he crying? The boss looked around in surprise. Drops of blood had stuck to the shoulders of her battlesuit. But to Snake, it was just the rain that was drenching them. He and she were in the same place, but looking at different scenery. And I love that because obviously when we play the game, all we see is rain. And she says raining blood, and we're just forced to assume, oh, it must just be metaphorical. No, she's not seeing what we're seeing. Page 69, this is just a little interesting thing I noticed in Google Translate. It interpreted Kuwabara as simply good luck. And I've noticed that a few times. I've had to correct it, because it doesn't translate literally all the time. It does make some suppositions of its own. At this point, in this iteration of Google Translate, it goes, well, culturally, this is what it would be equivalent for you in your culture, which, sometimes you want, sometimes you don't. It would be nice if Google Translate annotated a little bit and said, well, this is what we've done for your convenience. Page 72. Since the boss suddenly disappeared, Snake had been alone until he was called by Fox. But before her, he was nothing more than a baby. Not a grown man. Page 73. Jack, I can't take you. She held out her hand. Her face was gentle. It was like when she first offered her help when he was a new recruit. Snake reached out his hand. In his head, he knew that this betrayal had meant that their paths had gone their separate ways, but he still wanted to be saved. And then his hand was mercilessly crushed in the boss's grip. And throughout this book, Snake is so pathetic about the boss. He is so heartbroken. He so wants to be reunited with her. Page 75. The boss, while watching Snake drift downstream, says, "Go with the flow. I have no choice but to stay." Which is in the game, "Drift away. My place is with them now." So the change is very subtle, but it is significant. In the novelization, she's saying, I have no choice but to stay, which implies that she doesn't really want to do this. This is against her will, whereas in the game, she says, my place is with them now, which implies much more agency on her part. There is choice. And this won't be the last time we see this recurring water metaphor, with Snake traveling through water to get to the next stage of his journey. It's a symbol of transformation and progress and change, and we will delve into that further when we encounter the sorrow. Page 77. He raised his hand high, as if to recall the boss's memories. A piece of cloth was blown away by the wind. There was no mistaking it. It was her favorite bandana. It danced gracefully in the wind, like a snake running through the sky. He mustered all his life force and grabbed the bandana. And finally, page 83. Davy Crockett was originally the name of a hero who died fighting Mexico at the destroyed Alamo. But the underlying cause of the battle was the unbridled expansion of development into already inhabited areas under the pressure of population growth. So there we go, we finally have the answer as to why we should remember the Alamo. And where's the basement? And on that note, over and out.